All right, good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz. We are here to talk with you about the paranormal as we are each and every Saturday night. And tonight we're going to be having a holiday show here. Yeah, it does sound really loud.
It definitely seems weird.
And I know that
somebody's been messing with these settings.
We're broadcasting in the chat room on SpookySouthCoast.com, Spooky TV, and I'm sure we're blowing out their eardrums because I've been messing around with the dial a little bit there. So you guys can just let us know if there's issues with the sound, because to me I sound really loud and tinny. Where's all my bass? Where's my bass at? There we go. All right. Well, we are going to keep muddling through, and we're not really low battery day. It says our breathing sounds fine. That's Moniz that you usually hear breathing into the microphone, by the way. He's practicing for when he makes his phone calls later on this week. It's the holiday season, you know. It's everybody's got their own traditions. Moniz is calling women and being creepy. I already got him last week with the whole sex offender thing, but that's a different story for a different show. But tonight we're going to be talking about Christmas ghosts and paranormal stories and all kinds of stuff with our guest. He's the content director for Spooky South Coast, which basically means he tells us what to do now. And he's also a noted author, and he's what I like to call a...
Man about town?
Chris, what's the name that I have for you? An analytical folklorist? Is that what I call you?
Yeah. That's now my title is people address me as folklore expert, which anyone who's a folklorist or an expert in anything knows that probably doesn't fit me too well.
Well, I'm getting complaints here from the chat room that they can't see my face. It's like, that's my Christmas gift to you. You don't have to see my face, but yeah, I mean, it's a good title. I mean, as far as I know, you're the only analytical folklorist out there, so it looks good on the business card.
It really does, and I'm printing those up for the holiday season as my gift to myself. So, analytical folklorist. It's just confusing enough that no one knows exactly what I do, which is a lot like my life.
You know, and what people don't realize about you is, and we've talked about it here on the show, for those who don't realize, though, you're a teacher. And you're not just a teacher by profession, you're a teacher by nature. And I think that in that capacity, that's why we love bringing you on the show here, because any guest can come on and promote their latest book or talk about their latest project, but when you come on, you always teach us something. And we always learn something, and the audience learns something. And I think that when somebody does something, and it's not their profession, but it's actually just who they are, then that would look really good on a business card too. Chris Balzano, teacher in life.
Thank God it's not a life teacher. Yeah, it's funny because this week I had to really balance that delicate razor of not coming up with content for my students that was fun and holiday based without offending and without isolating. And there are some really good gems that, some of which I'm going to share tonight with you. But it's this very interesting balance you have to do as a teacher, and it's one of those things that this week provided a lot of really good material. I hope that, and the best part is you're saying teacher, but I'm also a huge learner. And sometimes when we're in discussions in class, and my students aren't, rocket scientists by any stretch of the imagination, just by the students that I usually am assigned to teach, because I have my specialty is working with the tough cases. They come out with some beauties and some things that really make my brain pop. Mm-hmm. And so when I do that, I always be like, you know what? I'm going to store that away. That sounds like a Balzano breakdown to come someday.
Well, that's what we love having you on here for, is these Balzano breakdowns where, we really get to the essence of things. And that's why I think we're going to do that tonight. We're going to get down to the essence of basically the I mean, how do you want to put this? Because, I mean, we're basically analyzing various different aspects of holiday traditions, holiday stories. I mean, I know what I've got here in front of me deals with a lot of the legends and stories associated with Christmas. But what have you got on the docket for us tonight?
I told you I wanted to talk about the Four Ghosts of Dickens, and how they own so much more to folklore than they do Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And in that A Christmas Carol, with all of these ghosts of Christmas stages and the setting of it, is actually kind of devoid of Christ. And so it's much more, maybe that's why it's such a universal theme that so many people can pick up on and adapt, is that it actually, for all of its religious undertones, doesn't have a religious anchor, or a specific religious anchor. And so, and with that as my launching pad, I was just like, this season brings out the best in people, but it also brings out some really creepy and eerie and often inspirational things. And so my really thing was connections between, the holiday season and the unknown.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the fact that A Christmas Carol is devoid of the religious aspect, because let's face it, I mean, if Ebenezer Scrooge was really that much of a jerk, nothing would slap him back to reality like a quick visit from Jesus. And that don't happen. It's I mean, I don't know, we can get into this a lot later, but, not only is it a question of where does his revelation come, where does his, to quote a religious word, epiphany come, but more importantly, who the heck wants him changed? What's the motivation of the universe in getting this one man to change, and why, and who's the directive from? And that's something that I'm definitely looking to explore and to get hopefully a lot of feedback in terms of, I want people calling up and giving their opinions of it, as well as their opinions of which is already starting in the chat room, their opinions of the best representation of the story. Well, and not only that, too, but, I mean, we can leave the phone lines open all night if anybody has any kind of, maybe an obscure Christmas tradition that they observe, or maybe they've had a paranormal Christmas story that they could share. I mean, the phone lines are open for all that good stuff at 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. You can also email us, spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com, or like Chris said, you can jump into the chat room on Spooky TV at spookysouthcoast.com, and we've got all of our friends in there. I just want to say happy holidays to everybody in the chat room, so that we don't forget to do that tonight. Excuse me. And one of the interesting stories that I read online earlier was related to a child's toy phone, where it was a Christmas gift, and this little girl wanted to call her grandmother to tell her about what she got for Christmas, but the regular phone was way too high up, and she couldn't reach it. She wasn't allowed to crawl up on the counter to get to it, and none of the family was around, so she picked up the toy phone to kind of pretend call Grandma, and to her surprise, this being back in the 1950s, to her surprise, there was a live operator on the end of that toy phone asking where to connect the call. So she said, I want to call Grandma. And next thing you know, she was talking to her grandmother. And not only did she speak with her, but when the mother actually called the grandmother on the regular phone later to kind of share the story with her, the grandmother's like, oh, no, I had a conversation with her. I spoke with her. And recounted the entire conversation. And the girl who wrote the story ended up getting in trouble for climbing the counter, even though she didn't. But and she said, it just must be the magic of the holiday season. And I think that is definitely something that carries through with a lot of people's experiences at this time of year, that whether you believe in the paranormal, whether you believe in magic, whether you believe in anything beyond just ourselves, you can't deny that when the holidays roll around, there's something tangible in the air.
Yeah, and I'd like to start out with a Christmas ghost story of my own, if I can.
Absolutely.
And this is one from my own experience that I don't think I've ever really shared with the public. I might have dropped a quick reference to it. But back in 1999, I made a failed attempt at becoming a Floridian. Obviously, a mistake that I would correct. quote-unquote mistake that I would correct later, but I moved down to Orlando. And the first Christmas we were down, we decided to drive back up. And this was before we had children, and so it was just the two of us in our Ford Focus, making depending on what the weather traffic is like, either the 27 or the 87-hour journey from Orlando, Florida to Massachusetts. And it was pretty much clear sailing the whole way. We actually made really good time. We didn't even have to stop over. And I was really motivated because I wanted to see my niece, who would become my godchild. I hadn't seen her yet. She'd been born a month and a half earlier, and I was really, really motivated. Like, it was one of those things where I just wanted to go through everything just so I could see her, you know? And we're driving. We decided to stop off for our first, or if I should say it really, our last gas up, and to get some coffee. By this time, it was pretty late at night. I think it was, 8 or 9 o'clock at night, which is when you're driving since, or late the night before. It's late. And we stopped off, and I believe we stopped off in Danbury, although I'm not quite sure about that. We stopped off. We went in, clear skies, we got some coffee, my wife got a soda, we gassed up again. When we came to gas up the car, it was basically a blizzard. We don't know where it came from. This was one of those, spot storms, and it was crazy. I mean, the snow was already starting to stick. It was already starting to stick on our windshield. And we both looked at each other, we're like, we're so close. When you're driving that long, 1,500 miles, that Danbury to Boston is really close. And we're like, we just want to get through this. We want to get through this. And we're like, should we push through? Should we not push through? We pulled on to the road. We got pulled back onto the main road and back onto the highway, and the snow was already sticking there. I was like, this is ridiculous. How could a snowstorm hit like this quickly and have this much of an impact? And we started sliding. We even started kind of like, okay, we're just going to have to get off at the next exit. We're going to have to get a hotel. There's no way we can get through this. And all of a sudden, our rearview mirror, we saw a snowplow. And so we're like, okay, well, they're going to be they're going to be plowing in front of us. I guess it's okay. And the snowplow, passed us and went ahead, and we got into its wake. And the odd thing was, anyone who's ever been behind a snowplow, that's like the worst place you can be, because while the snow is off the road, it's now on your windshield. And for some weird reason, it was almost like we were in this little orb, as we're going, not a ghostly orb, and as we're driving, the snow seemed to even be cutting itself in front of our windshield. And there wasn't practically any snow hitting us, and it was like, oh my God, this is the clearest driving we've ever done. The roads were clear, we weren't slipping anymore. And we're following behind this. We followed, for a good, I'd say probably half hour or so, no trouble whatsoever. And then we were approaching the Massachusetts border. And as we started kind of approaching it, there was a turn in the road, which wasn't too severe. It's like, it's a highway. You're going, 75 miles an hour to, depending on the conditions. We weren't going quite that fast. And we took this corner, and all of a sudden, the plow was just gone. The plow had completely disappeared. And maybe a minute later, we crossed over into Massachusetts, and for some reason, it was almost like a snow line. The snow was nowhere near as bad. And we got to the house, within the next hour and a half, got to saw my niece. But it was always this weird thing that my wife and I didn't really talk about at the moment, because, when you're living and you're experiencing, you're just kind of just happy to be there. It was like, where did that plow go? As soon as we turned that corner, that plow was gone. And there's no way that it could have gone off the road. We're talking a matter of seconds between, that it was out of our sight. It completely vanished. And it was almost as if, someone had sent that plow to us that one night so that we could get to them in time for Christmas Eve. And it was a really weird experience that we still every once in a while look at each other and go like, hey, remember that ghost plow? And my wife who's like, dude, keep the paranormal out of my life. She even kind of shakes her head and says, yeah, that was a really weird thing. We don't know, there's tons of these stories of plows and safety trucks helping people and finding out that there really was no call to 911 or all these things, and that's my wife and I's our little own version of that story.
Well, it's an excellent version of that story, and it's something that you do see a lot of reports of, though. Like you said, these kind of like the guardian angels, making sure that people's holidays go off as planned. I mean, so many people travel this time of year, and they wait till the last minute, and they try to catch a flight maybe 2 days before the holiday, and it doesn't seem like they're going to make it. And then all of a sudden they get somebody who comes up to them and says, listen, it's more important that you get to your family than I get to where I'm going to go. Here, take my ticket. You hear these stories all the time, and then it's the kindly gentleman who disappears. It doesn't really happen anymore now because of, airline safety. They know exactly who's buying what ticket when now, but they are out there, and there's always the stories that we hear about loved ones who have passed, who find a way to reach in and kind of touch people during the holidays in a certain manner, whether it be through a certain song that reminds you of them, or a certain feeling, or maybe even a particular gift. I know that when Grandma got run over by the reindeer, I'm sure that when they opened all those presents afterwards, they thought about her.
Yeah, and the weird thing is, it's like you wonder about what that was. Was that a ghostly thing? Was it an angel thing? Was it a time slip thing somehow? Was it and one of the weird aspects of that story is that, was it somehow some transmission to some person who was in real life who went out and did something? Because the odd twist of that is that, years later, my mother-in-law remarried, and she married a man who worked for the Connecticut plowing, the people who were plowing the roads, and he kind of confirms that he was out that night, and he was plowing near the Massachusetts border.
Wow.
And so it's this weird, synchronicity kind of thing going on. Could it possibly have been him? Could he have, somehow future-wise connected to us? And so it's really this kind of gem that we always keep in, but it's never fit in anything that I've ever done, written about or anything like that. So it's always been kind of close to my heart. And I always think about it on Christmas.
Well, I'm glad you could share it with us. We feel honored.
Well, thank you very much.
One thing, though, that we have to point out about when we're talking about this is we are going to mention Christmas a lot. But my feeling is that the magic, the whatever is associated with this time of year, extends beyond all religious borders, because this holiday was sacred to pagans, and this time of year was important to all cultures, and it doesn't have anything to do necessarily with the birth of Christ, which we can argue about whether or not that actually happened on Christmas, when it's pretty much known now that it wasn't even close. But there seems to be a feeling that pervades all religions, all peoples, all cultures at this time of year. I mean, I grew up in a household where my father was Jewish and his family was Jewish, but it didn't stop the connection to the time of year. Once Hanukkah was over, they felt in the Christmas spirit, even though they didn't celebrate it. And it's something that just it takes over, and as much as it's been commercialized, we've still retained a lot of that today.
And I think that, we talk a lot on the show about, is there such place as a cursed place? Is there are there areas that can draw negative or positive things in? We talk about, are there people or are there items that can draw people in somehow, that can be tapped into for good or bad reasons? What if there's a time of the year that can be? And that's why these religions are drawn to that time, that there is something actually going on. I would love it if Matt knew anything, in terms of the solar system, our distance from the sun, things like that, of why that might be, potentially.
Well, what I can tell you is in wintertime here in the Northern Hemisphere, we are actually closer to the sun than we are at summertime, believe it or not.
I remember that from Mr. Wizard's World.
Well, it's a fact. It's just the way we average about 94 million miles away from the sun generally. So, and it's only a few million miles difference, which is being 100 feet away from a big bonfire and taking one step closer. You're really going to be that much warmer, type of thing. But the only other thing I can think of is maybe the electromagnetic fields of both the sun and the earth may interplay better or worse, depending upon your perspective of it.
I know people, when they investigate, really track solar activity and try to make links between levels of high activity and high solar activity and stuff like that. So maybe it's the season itself that does the same thing.
It's also possible too. And it's something that's a little bit maybe trippier than we get into here usually. But there is the idea that when people put out those feelings, it kind of becomes a real physical force. When people,
collective unconscious. Yeah,
when people are in the Christmas spirit, then the Christmas spirit becomes a almost solid physical thing.
Which is really weird, because you would think, origin-wise, and I know we've both kind of done some research on the different variants of Santa Claus, throughout the cultures, and and different religions even that kind of embrace this giver of gifts, and so many of them are cold weather places. You would think that you would care less for your family when you're stuck up with them for, days at a time because of the weather. That, would be the exact opposite. But I guess, that's also the time when family traditions and family bonding happens as well. Maybe all families aren't like mine.
Well, it's also one of those few times of the year when you can, at least for a few hours on one particular day, generally most of the world is in a good mood. There's a lot of bad moods.
Eggnog is involved. But
well, yeah. But my brother makes a monster eggnog out of lighter fluid. But it's probably between that and New Year's is really the only time that you can kind of guarantee that you're going to get that much outpouring of positive feelings. I mean, even the curmudgeoniest bastard will smile a little bit on Christmas, I would assume.
I do.
And let's not forget, in Ghostbusters, too, it was the holiday season, specifically the singing of the New Year's song that drove the evil forces away.
Yeah.
That unity for that one moment, for that one time.
And it's to me, I don't know. I mean, I get stressed out, being just a poor radio host. Well, my 5 jobs, but I get stressed out all pretty much from Halloween on about making sure I can pay for everything, and I get stressed out with making sure that everybody's going to be happy with what they get. I mean, I don't even consider for a second, anything that I might get because it's so far from my mind. Not like when I was a kid. Now it's completely different. It's about my son and about my family and what they're going to enjoy. But the number one feeling I feel on Christmas is relief when everything goes well. And I just feel so much better about myself. And I can sit there and say, even though we have these struggles, even though we have these daily challenges in life, it worked out pretty well for at least a few hours. And then the toys break and, everybody eats all the food and somebody gets into a fight inevitably.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know that we were, taking inventory today of what we had bought, because we're getting ready for the ritual of the wrapping. And it is that same kind of motion that, is it all right? You know what I'm saying? Is it right? What's the reaction going to be? And then, it never, at least in my experience, it never seems to be a letdown. There might be some gifts that you give, they're like, oh, thanks. But then there's some gifts that you think, like, really? I was just thinking about you, and I saw this, and I picked it up, and it's like, this explosion, and I think that really kind of feeds into that spirit that you're talking about, which can become, a kind of self-moving entity.
Well, and one thing, I mean, we can talk about this later on in the show when we talk about our new project and put out the call to our listeners to share their stories with us, but you can almost attach something to that gift. You can attach that feeling and that intent to that gift so that, when it's something beyond just something you grabbed on the shelf, and when it's something that actually kind of spoke to you about a person, it's almost like you can attach those intentions and those feelings to that item when you pass it on to them. And what might seem on the surface as being kind of like a, huh? Turns into a, oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of my little acting version of what happens. And
I know all I want for Christmas is a copy of Ghosts of the South Coast.
You're getting it. It's coming sooner or later. I have a few ones that I have to mail out on Monday, so I'll make sure I can throw one in there. And if you are in the listening area and you need to pick up a copy of Ghosts of the South Coast for the holiday season, I have them here in the studio. Come here by midnight, and you can get a signed copy. It's only $20. I'll make it out to whoever you want. I'll write everything short of threats against the President of the United States in the book. So
I'll handle those.
That's on you, Moniz. Well, when you were looking through some of these holiday traditions, Chris, did you come up with any really strange histories behind any of our Christmas traditions? Because I found a few of them. I was wondering if you would come up with any.
I was really focusing on trying to get some stories, especially scavenging Ghost Village news of some kind of holiday things that were going on or that have gone on. So I'll leave traditions up to you.
Well, here's what I found really interesting. There's a lot of things that I take for granted in the holiday season that I can't really understand why we have them. why we might observe certain things. For example, candy canes. I never really gave them a second thought. I just thought they were kind of decorative. They were the colors of the season, and it's just something that was always around at Christmas time. I actually found something pretty interesting online that says that candy canes were actually invented about 230 years ago. And according to this report, one evening the children were being very loud and noisy at church and were not paying attention to the church services. So in an effort to keep them quiet for the Christmas ceremony, they were given a long white sugar candy stick. And that became eventually into the idea of the candy cane, which the red and the white symbolizes the purity of Jesus, and the red symbolizes the blood of his sacrifice for us. And the shape of it, some schools have thought are that it's supposed to be the shape of a shepherd's crook, and others are that it's a J for Jesus. So, I never would have thought that there was that much significance placed on something that basically every time Santa gave me one when I got my picture taken, I kind of threw it away. It's kind of like spitting out the wafer, I
was going to say, way to throw away Jesus, brother. And I think the one thing that as I was looking at some of the legends and traditions, that I was seeing and kind of, going through all of these kind of obscure references, is that so much of it is based on superstition. And so much of it is based on, things that we would consider magic. But then there are also these things that are completely mundane and, they needed a spokesperson, so kind of Santa became that. That kind of thing. That that's this weird, very weird holiday because it's this mix of these old superstitions, throwing salt over your shoulder mixed with commercialism that have come to kind of create and galvanize people, not only in this country but in other countries as well. And the other weird thing is so many of these things are based on this, and this goes back to the whole Christmas Carol idea. So much of our holiday traditions are based on these kind of things that are black and white, that are opposites of each other. The nice list, the naughty list. So many of these things were meant to be inspiring and then scary as well. Mm-hmm. And so it's really this unique kind of blend of those things that kind of makes the holiday that the holidays that people know.
Well, you mentioned the scary stuff. I found some pretty interesting scary ones, which, we all know that Santa Claus is kind of an amalgamation of a number of different, St. Nicholas and a number of other traditions in other cultures and countries. But this was an interesting article that I read. In Iceland, they have something called the Yule Man, which is a goblin that begins appearing 12 days before Christmas and steals meats and sausages, milk and candles, plays mischievous tricks on humans. In Greece, they have the Calicatsorol, a group of hairy trolls that play pranks on humans and befoul food. France has Pierre Fouettard, or Whipping Father, a man who is depicted as a murderous, terrorizing figure with a blackened face and a whip in his hand. One legend says he killed 3 children, cut them up, and cooked them in a stew. St. Nicholas happened upon the scene and resurrected the children, after which Pierre Fouettard repented and became St. Nick's companion. And supposedly, this is kind of interesting, the character on the front cover of Led Zeppelin's album, Led Zeppelin 4, is supposed to be Pierre Fouettard. Then there's Black Peter from Spain, a demon enslaved by Santa, a mischievous fellow who puts bad children in a sack and takes them back to Spain to work in Santa's workshops. The Krampus in Austria and Hungary, who he's kind of the anti-Santa. He goes around punishing the bad children while Santa would give them the presents. And a lot of these traditions relate around December 5th and December 6th instead of the 25th. And this one was pretty cool too. And I know I'm not going to pronounce it right, but it's Nicht Rupert, another German companion of Santa who appears on Christmas Eve with a long beard and wears fur. And Rupert is actually one of their words for devil, apparently. And he's a dark figure that plays against Santa's light. And he is, again, the same idea. He does all the negativity and all the dark opposites of what Santa does. So these are just some of the stories that I found out there. And there's another one, too, that's actually still somewhat observed today in Pennsylvania Dutch country. And I'm going to throw this one out there, Chris, and see if you've ever heard it in your many, many years of collecting folklore stories. Have you ever heard of Der Belsnickel?
Not until you emailed me about it.
Well, the idea of Der Belsnickel, there's a few different reports that I heard. One is that he is a cranky, fur-clad character who neighbors and family members might dress up as. In another version of the story, he's actually the devil. And he goes around with a hickory switch. And he basically passes judgment on the kids right then and there. You either get to pick something good out of his bag, or he whips you with the hickory switch. But St. Nicholas supposedly comes and captures him on Christmas Eve, ties him up, and makes him go around with him, and rewards all the children, be it good or bad. So, these traditions, obviously, we can see how they play into a lot of the characterization of Santa Claus today. But it shows that there was kind of a darker side to this holiday, whether it was to scare children into being good, or whether it was really the fact that there needed to be that dark to the light. It's out there.
Right, and then of course, in more modern storytelling, it's the, taking the evil bad force and trying to find redemption for him or her, and that's kind of the.
We'll get into a lot of this in the next hour when we can talk about the Dickens ghosts. But would you consider Scrooge to be kind of one of these, dark to the light figures, at least in the beginning of the story?
I would, and I think that's what makes him. That's what makes him appealing, because he's an extreme of kind of what is in all of us and what possibly can come out sometimes in us. And it goes from being a character flaw to a lifestyle, and I think that's why he becomes such a kind of touchstone for people.
And I think that we all hope that we can have that redemption in our own lives. I mean, obviously not everybody's is the same depths of character that Scrooge displays, but. It shows that to all of us, if we're just faced with the opportunity to change, we'd like to think that we would take it.
Right. And what it takes to make us change is different, which is why the ghosts are so universal and kind of this really good catching mechanism for the different types of sparks of redemption, which is something we're going to get into a lot when we come back.
And also when we come back, as I mentioned, we'll talk about the idea of haunted objects, which is our new project that we're working on. But a lot of the stories that I was finding online of people reporting their holiday tales, they would talk about a certain traditional item they would bring out, be it an ornament or a decoration, or in one case it was a chair that they only brought out at Christmas time that they left there that was supposed to be for the Christmas spirit to come and take a seat in. And it seems like these items have something attached to them, and I think that by people focusing on them, they've kind of created that spirit attached to them. And when we think about it, we probably all have something like that in our own household. There's something that it's not Christmas until this comes out. And right. I know when I was younger, it was always there was a ceramic Christmas tree that my mother had with all the little lights in it. And even though she would set up, she's crazy. She's Christmas crazy. She would set up the Christmas tree the day after Halloween if she could. But we knew it was really getting close to Christmas when that tree would come out. And in my wife's family, they have one of those advent calendars where you move the little mouse each day as you get closer to Christmas. And that was kind of their tradition. So I think that these items have developed this power to really instill the Christmas spirit in people.
Yeah, and you need that countdown. It's kind of like
that's the reminder for the parents. That's what it is.
Right. I mean, is there any way to for a normal person to be that great person all year long, or can there be this kind of like going from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds is not easy, but going from 0 to 60 in 24 days of an advent calendar is a lot easier.
But, I mean, if they do attach those feelings and those sentiments to these items, what if you left them out all year? What if you're somebody who has, like, for example, I don't know if you're familiar with the pro wrestler Mick Foley, but he actually has in his house a Christmas room. where he has Christmas decorations all year round because he loves the holiday so much. I mean, if you keep that one item out where you could see it, would it still have that power, do you think, or is it because it's so closely associated with the holiday that it's kind of limited in its reach?
I think that it's probably limited in its reach for most people. I think that it's probably one of those things where, you know, I don't think the object itself has the power. I think it's the people's emotions behind it. And I think that, you know, like with so many things, you know, if we saw a miracle every day, they would stop being miracles to us. They would become commonplace. And so, you know, to have that out kind of really brings out that part of you that, you know, is looking to be the best person you can be and looking to get into the spirit, and then you kind of all focus on that one thing. And it's the anticipation, too. You know, we've talked about, you know, if people ever got out their EMF meters right before a surprise party and took readings, what would happen? Or something else that could, you know, if you could take pictures, would you see energy in people and things like that? And I think it's kind of the same way, that anticipation of it coming out, and then the release when it does is a lot of the mojo that gets attached to it.
Well, if I could keep one Christmas decoration out all year round, you know what it would be?
Oh, mistletoe.
Mistletoe, absolutely. Which I was unaware of the history of that either till researching this show. It says the tradition of kissing underneath the mistletoe began with a Scandinavian goddess called Frigga. So that might be why, you know, we use the word frigging. I don't know. Frigga's son Balder was shot with an arrow made of mistletoe. While Frigga's friends conjured up powers to save the boy, his mother cried tears that became the white berries on the mistletoe. Frigga's friends succeeded in saving Balder's life. Frigga ordered that the mistletoe should never again be used to harm others. Instead, she made it a symbol of love by kissing everyone who passed under it, which is a great story, and it's a little bit better than this other story that I read that said that the sharp edges of holly leaves are to remind us of the crown of thorns that Jesus wore upon his brow, and the red berries remind us of the blood that Jesus shed. So there seems to be a lot of preoccupation with the blood of Jesus here in some of the stuff that I was finding.
Well, I think that it's important to remember that. And you see a lot of, especially down here in the South, a lot of signs that are kind of focusing you back on what this season means for Christians, or what it should mean for Christians.
But at the same time, you know, when we celebrate the birthday of other noted figures, we don't, you know, focus so much on their death either. At the same time, you know, and nobody's talking about James Earl Ray on Martin Luther King Day, for example. Throwing that out there.
Well, you know, I think it's also, you know, most clergy would tell you that this is the second most important holiday on the Catholic or Christian calendar. I can't say Christian, but at least Catholic calendar. You know, most clergy would tell you that it's Easter, not Christmas. So I think that's where that ideal comes from. And
before we take a break here for the news, Chris, is there anything on your Christmas list this year? Is there anything that you really want to get this year?
A copy of Ghost of the South.
Well, you will be getting that. That goes without saying.
Well, you know, that's just about it for me. So,
but so I can't imagine all the things that you could ask for Christmas, and all you want is a measly book.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, like you were saying, man, it's so much more focused on my kids nowadays. So it's more of like, man, I really want to find that orange surfboard that my son wants.
I was going to say
something like that, and more than anything, I want for myself. I want sleep, which I'm going to get because I'm on Christmas break for 2 weeks.
Well, you know that up here people have to get sleds for Christmas. They can't get surfboards like you can in Florida. But what's the big toy happening in your house this Christmas season?
Well, you know, my son is obsessed with dinosaurs. Anyone who knows me is tired of hearing that, but he is. And so we got him those toys that are like blocks you put together, and they're like dinosaur captures. So that's the big thing that he's going to flip out. That, and you know, he's finally gone from the leapfrog age to the DS age. So that's the other big hit that we're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully my son's not listening, but we have a DSi coming his way, and Pokemon is huge in my house this year, which I find amazing because I thought Pokemon fad was over like 10 years ago, but apparently it's still going strong, and so it's going to be a very Pokemon Christmas at my house.
And as for my daughter, you know, you give her anything and she's excited. So, you know, we're just going to give her all the gifts my son has. We're just going to give her the paper, and hopefully that satisfies her till her birthday.
Well, let's just point out that your daughter is very young. Otherwise, it sounds like she's just not very bright. So, yes.
Well, you know.
And for all you kids that are listening, we're just kidding about this. Santa Claus is really bringing all these presents. This is just what grown-ups talk about because we feel so paled in comparison to Santa Claus's awesome power. So there you have it. All right, we're going to take a break for the news. When we come back on the other side, we're going to talk more about these legends of Christmas. Chris is going to get into the ghosts of Charles Dickens because, and I've heard Chris talk about this before, and it's more than just a good story. And we'll talk about all that and more coming up in the second hour. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about the new project that Chris and I are working on that we need your help for. We need your stories, your experiences, and I can tell you that if you think about it, you can probably contribute something to this because we've all heard these stories. So we'll be back with all of that and more coming up after a break. Again, Ghost of the South Coast. It's here for sale in the studio. $20. Come on down. We'll be here till midnight. Stay tuned for more here on Spooky South Coast. Welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz. And we have content director for Spooky South Coast, Christopher Balzano, on the line. He is performing in his role as analytical folklorist tonight and basically a man all about the paranormal and all about Christmas. Sharing with us some of the interesting Balzano breakdowns of Christmas thoughts and traditions and just talking about that Christmas feeling, Chris. I never noticed that, Chris. Christmas. Huh.
You wonder? You know, I think really people should celebrate me.
You put the Chris in Christmas. So,
I don't know what to reply to that.
While we were taking a break for the news, did you come up with any better gifts that you wanted besides the book? Like socks?
You know, that's actually one of my family traditions is that my brother-in-law gave my mother gave my brother-in-law these electric blue socks one year. And he was like, I would never wear, when would I ever possibly wear this? Like, I don't go to clown college, you know, I'm not, when would I ever wear these? And so the next year, she got them wrapped up. And so for the past 15 years, these socks have been, you know, passed as kind of like one of the last presents that someone new every year. So it's kind of become this very weird, you're in the family, you're considered part of the family when you get the socks. So like when my wife got them, and then my, you know, brother-in-law part 2 got them, and, you know, it's this very weird sock thing. So I'm hoping to do anything except for get the socks. Because they're, you know, I might actually wear them this year.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a tradition for my wife to give me socks because I usually wear them out between, you know, Father's Day and Christmas. So I have no idea why I destroy socks the way I do, but it's kind of a paranormal thing unto itself.
Says the person that stands through an entire show.
That shouldn't really affect them that much, right? I do stand like all day long, so that might be part of it. But anyway, you know, I mean, when we're younger, you know, we have all these dreams of what we're going to get for Christmas and all these things that we want. And then when we get older, we go out and we buy everything that we wanted that we never got for Christmas. So with that in mind, if anybody has a Robbie the Robot for the Nintendo Entertainment System, Tim at SpookySouthCoast.com. Name your price. It's amazing because Costa and I go to a lot of, like, you know, we go to the pawn shop together, and we go to like all these. Make it sound like we go antiquing together or something, but you know, we go out on adventures from time to time, and sooner or later, one of us bumps into something that we always wanted when we were younger, and now we can have it. And even though we have no practical use for it anymore, we need to at least possess it for a little while. So, you really distracted me with that Back to the Future game, by the way.
December 22nd.
December 22nd. It's coming out December 22nd.
Yep.
And I can buy it December 22nd.
I believe it's on the PlayStation Store.
It's going to be on... Nice. $24.95. There's going to be 5 episodes. I'm telling my brother's in the studio. I'm telling him all about it because he's as big of a Back to the Future fan as I am. So, All right. Anyway, I don't mean to hijack the discussion, Chris. You were talking about Christmas before. You want to go back to that?
Well, I do have a little bit of a Christmas miracle, which I could totally segue into, because one of the things that I want for Christmas, I guess I do want something, is a Patriots win.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling that most of the people, in the area are hoping that the Patriots can pull one out against that, offensive onslaught being brought on by their backup quarterback on his first start. But here's the segue. There was a little bit of early Christmas cheer, miracle, however you want to place it, out of Wisconsin and from the Bishop of Green Bay this week that I ran across on Ghost Village News that I just wanted to share with everybody. And that is the Adelaide Brissa. And for those people who don't know who that is, back in 1959, she had an appearance of Mary to her. And Mary spoke to her and called herself, I believe, the Queen of All Giving or something like that. And, it kind of went, and since then, it's been kind of this place where people have gone to be healed, and people have gone to champion Wisconsin, which I guess is outside of Green Bay, and been uplifted by being there, and Jeff Belanger writes this really great section on his legend tripping book about appearances of Mary and kind of, people who flock to them. But this week was officially confirmed. It's only one of 12 confirmed sightings around the world, and the first in America, of the appearance of Mary. So while the Green Bay fans can they can basically get over the fact that they're going to get their Christmas gift, Christmas coal early, from the Patriots by realizing that they actually have the only appearance of Mary that's been confirmed in the United States this week. So, Merry Christmas to the people of Green Bay.
A question for you, Chris.
Yeah.
Isn't this the same place where people would bring rosary beads and they would get a gold varnish that would start to appear on them?
Yep. That and there was also this weird thing.
The smell of roses and rose petals falling from the sky?
Yeah, there was actually rosaries that would fall, like whole rosaries that would fall from the sky.
Yep.
And so it became this very, paranormally charged. Usually, these things of Mary are, now you can walk. And instead, there were these very weird things. There was one story that I read, because I started following up on this. There was one story I read that came up with it where a person had crutches, and they went into some body of water that was there. I can't remember the body of water. And when they came out, not only did they no longer need their crutches, but their crutches were broken up into crosses.
Interesting.
Wow.
No, and there was no person nearby who could have possibly done this in the time that the person was in the water. So and then like you're saying, things falling from the sky and things transforming right there.
I actually got a chance to test a set of rosary beads that were turned to gold. Well, they weren't completely turned to gold, but they had this golden hue to them. Then I have, at the time, an AA, or atomic absorption spectrometer, that at work, one of these things.
As we all do.
Yeah, things that just keep around. It's for analyzing metals. And I took a scraping off the top of the beads, and it did turn out to be actual gold. So whether this, is something that, it just boggled my mind. It just boggled my mind.
It's just that most of these sites are accompanied by miracles in the form of healings and things like that, and this one had that as well. But it also had this different twist of paranormal activity happening in the form of things transforming and things falling from the sky and stuff like that. When you analyze it, I'm surprised that you didn't find out that it was cheats.
Well, I'll tell you this much: Green Bay may have had the the symbolic appearance of the Virgin Mary, but I think Gillette might have the symbolic appearance of something with the name Lombardi on it sometime soon.
We just isolated every fan from the Green Bay area.
They don't have computers out there. We actually have one of our chat room regulars, Paranormal Pirate, is here in the spooky studio with us, decked out in a Tom Brady jersey. So there's karma for you right there.
That's great.
All right. Well, why don't we take a quick break? When we come back, Chris, we can go commercial free the rest of the way, and we can get into some more Christmas miracles, some Christmas stories, and we'll talk about those ghosts of Christmas, past, present, and future. And you're going to include Marley's ghost in that too, right? Because you said 4.
Oh yeah, heck yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So we'll be right back with more with Chris Balzano here on Spooky South Coast. All right, welcome back to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin, Matt Costa, science advisor, Matt Moniz, the paranormal pirate hanging out in the studio. And we have on the line our content director, Chris Balzano, who is our guest tonight, talking with us about Christmas, which is coming up. If you haven't finished your shopping, get out there now. There's a lot of stores that are still open. We have Spooky South Coast t-shirts available. We have Ghosts of the South Coast books available, so it makes a great present for your paranormal fans. And, of course, all of Chris's books are available as well. You can get them on Amazon.com and on MassCrossroads.com and pretty much everywhere books are sold. And speaking of books, Chris, I guess we should throw this out there, too, before we wrap up the discussion tonight with more Christmas stuff. But you and I are actually embarking on a new project, or basically you are, and I kind of honed my way into it, I guess.
Bailed me out sounds it's probably a better, a more accurate description of it, but yeah, it's I've been working on some different things outside of the paranormal realm that I'm hoping to kind of grow, and then I was approached by a publisher to via Mr. Belanger to work on a book of haunted items. And over the course of our discussions, we kind of extended it to some other kind of things, but basically, and I brought you on board, and Tim and I are looking to basically create this kind of account of these different haunted items that have floated in and out of people's lives, and document some of the classic cases, such as all those famous dolls that are around there, as well as kind of going into the heart of some of these museums that hold curiosities and kind of hold these haunted and cursed items as well. So that's the project that we got going, and we would love to have people's stories. And it's kind of this very broad term of haunted items, and it's one of the things that we're going to explore, and it's one of the things I've been exploring, as I've kind of been writing down notes for the introduction and for the kind of the description of what is a haunted item. And it's kind of like, is the item itself haunted? Does it become the spark of the haunting? Is it the reflection of the haunting? I literally mean reflection of the haunting at times. And so I would love to get people's ideas and people's stories as well.
And as you said, we are going to discuss a number of well-known cases, and our friend Low Battery Dave in the chat room has sent a lot of information about the little girl's dress that's at Stone's Public House, and we want those type of stories obviously to be represented. Annabelle the doll, Robert the doll, the haunted mirror at Myrtle's Plantation, all these different famous haunted items, but we also need to hear about the ones that people don't know about. We need to hear about the ones that have impacted people individually, and that might not be on a tour somewhere, or might not be in a museum somewhere, but are sitting on somebody's shelf in their house, or was on their shelf until they had to get rid of it. We want to hear about that. We want people to get in touch with us and share those stories. Maybe they had one, they no longer have it. Maybe they know somebody that had one. If we can get to the crux of the story there, that's what we're really looking for.
Right, and we're also looking for cursed as well, things that you think might have been cursed that, when you got rid of them, all of a sudden it was like, the clouds parted, the sunshine came through, and looking for some things that, maybe were bad tikis in your life.
And if you want to share these with us, you can obviously email us as the best way to get a hold of us. Tim at SpookySouthCoast.com, Balzano at SpookySouthCoast.com. You can also get a hold of both of us on Facebook, and pretty much, we're all over the place. If you can't get a hold of us, then you're not looking hard enough. So and
my wife says that you can't find me.
and we need these stories quick. Don't procrastinate, because part of the reason why I had to offer up my services because they gave you a really tight window to get this done. They did, and
it's one of those things. I actually wrote Picture Yourself Capturing Ghosts on Film on a much tighter deadline than this even, and it didn't come out quite the way that I wanted it to. So I'm looking to kind of redeem myself with this project here. So
if
you want to keep us in the paranormal world, we got we got to keep the juices flowing.
Yeah, because this book might become a haunted item if we don't get it out there in time. So.
Well, hopefully we can get at least one really good story about a haunted book for the book. So we're going to work on that.
I got one for you, actually.
Okay.
Your copy of Ghost of the South Coast. You're haunted by the prospect of actually receiving it. All right. Well, you will get it in time, hopefully in time for Christmas, and that's what we're talking about here tonight. And I know that you did have one more Christmas story that you wanted to share with us before we get into the Dickens ghosts.
Yeah, no, but this one's going to take a lot less time. Those of us who work at least me, working in the paranormal world, I kind of have this buyer's regret theme, which is someone calls me up or someone emails me and they want to tell me their story. And they tell their story, and then, I always try to set up like, well, why don't you email me some this, that, the other thing, or, well, why don't you call me back at another time we can discuss it. I always make some excuse for them to make a second contact, because a lot of people back down. They want to get the story out, and then once the story is out, it's kind of like something is lifted off their shoulders. They're relieved, and so they never contact me again. So the story is kind of lost in the paranormal ether that's out there. And this is one of those cases where someone contacted me, and I remember locking myself in the bathroom. My son was really young, and he was playing, and he was occupied, and so I'm like, okay, I locked myself in the bathroom and got this woman's story. Took a ton of notes. She never contacted me again. But her story went something like this. In early December, her brother had died, and she was really broken up about it. She was really horrified by it. It was this really traumatic thing. Anyone, especially during the holiday season, kind of gearing up for it, a death is always really powerful. And she was really grieving over it, and she came home one day, and this was only a few days before Christmas, so this was a few weeks after he had passed. And she had one of the old school, because it happened a few years ago, one of the old school voice machines. And, it was blinking, so she clicked on it, and it was her brother. And she's, she was, hey, what's going on? And she was kind of like thrown off, like, had this been on there the whole time? And she had just never noticed it. She had obviously gotten messages since then, and it was all very confusing. And it was just this message. It didn't say, like, I'm calling from beyond or anything like that. It was just like, hey, what's going on? Yeah, I just wanted to tell you in case I forget that, the gift that I got, Tim was like the young son. The gift that I got for Tim, I actually left over at a friend's house. It's in his, we bought it that night together. I wrapped it and I kind of put it in there. Me, I always forget things. And, so if I forget, if I have to be handed, don't forget to remind me that the present is in there. It was like some like weird message like that, basically telling where the gift was. And so she, this obviously made her cry again. She tried to listen to it a second time. It wasn't there on the answer machine anymore. But when she got in contact with her brother's friend, who actually then rummaged through his closet, there was the present, and it was addressed to the person. It was, from Uncle whatever it was, and she ended up being able to give it to her. And it was this really weird gift from beyond the grave.
Well. But you say that it was definitely left while he was still alive. I mean, they know for sure from date stamp.
Oh yeah, yep. The guy said he remembered going out. It was like just a little bit before the guy got into a car accident. It was, the guy remembered it vividly. Remembered it putting it in the closet. They remember joking around about it because he was such like a lackadaisical guy that he had actually seen this thing and remembered it and like, wow, this is the perfect time. I'm going to buy it now. And he remembered the whole thing. And the unfortunate thing was I was never able to make a second contact with this woman to check that story out. And so it's one of those things as an investigator, as an interviewer, you have to go by the intensity of the person who's telling the story. Mm-hmm. And the fact that this woman had such vivid details about it, the fact that, she had all these kind of things attached to it, the fact that it was well past it, so it was obviously something that was weighing on her, and she decided to call me. It it stayed with me to this day.
And, but that's the effect that it has. I mean, like you said, when you're in getting ready for the holidays and something like that happens, it takes a whole different turn. It's almost like it took every emotion that you had and completely put it into a 180.
Right, and then, in talking with her, one of the things I explored with her was, so then how'd you feel after that? Was it uplifting? Mm-hmm. Was it depressing? And she said that for her it was uplifting, and that for her it was one of these signs that her brother was in a better place because he had had kind of a questionable past, and it was confirmation for her that not only was he in a good place, but there was something positive after.
So it was a Christmas redemption for him, so to speak.
It actually was. Yeah, I've never thought of it that way, but yeah, it was this kind of his last act being this, glorious, gesture of giving and not forgetting.
Well, one character who was able to have that redemption in life and didn't have to wait for death for it to happen, of course, was Ebenezer Scrooge. And as we mentioned earlier, he was kind of that dark antithesis of Christmas at the beginning of the story. And I know that you've done a great deal of analysis on the four ghosts in A Christmas Carol, and you see them as more than just plot devices.
Yeah, I think that they're of this. I don't think necessarily Dickens was divinely inspired to write about them. I think that in many ways he might have used them as a literary device, but I think they hold up as something more than that. They really are this way for people to look into themselves and see what's going on. And one of the amazing things is I was teaching, like I said, I was teaching this thing, and you basically had to take a ghost. And I said there was a recession. And so 2 of the ghosts had to be fired. So we could only keep 1 ghost who could go out there and redeem people. Which ghost are you going to choose? And then write an essay about it. And overwhelmingly, the students picked the ghost of the future. And I was kind of like, as they were writing, I'm like, well, why do you pick the ghost of the future? They're like, when you look at that and you see something's bad's going to happen, you totally stop. And I'm thinking, that for their life, that makes complete sense because they're consequence-based. If you don't do your homework, this is going to happen to you. You're going to get an F if you don't do this, this, and this. If you don't pick up your room, this is going to happen. So they're very much consequence-based. And so I started talking to a lot of people who are my age and a little bit younger and a little bit older and being like, well, what ghost would you have saved? And then overwhelmingly, they picked the ghost of the past because they were looking at it like, if I could go back and change this, that, and that, I know I would be a better person. I'd be happier. I wouldn't have made the mistakes I made. And so it became this generational thing. I'm very interested if I was able to kind of talk to some people who were maybe between the ages of 20 and 30, which ghosts they would look for, like whether they were much more present-based because they were living in a time that, they feel like they could make an immediate change in POW, like they would get immediate results. And so in creating these ghosts, especially those 3, Dickens really created this kind of paranormal influence causing you to look inside yourself. And in doing it, he touched all the bases for all the different types of people that you can look to, or the kind of stages in your life you can look to kind of find that redemption. And Scrooge shows signs of that all throughout. There's these moments where he has that revelation, and then his defense mechanism kind of kicks in. And it's only, probably because of his age. And when he looks at the future, and he sees that there are these consequences that are happening, and more importantly, the future is potentially changeable, that he's actually able to kind of fall on his knees. And I don't think it's just that he's dead, because we all die. There's a reason why the ghost of Christmas future, or Christmas yet to come, is, so closely resembled to death, because it's coming, we're all going to die. And yet, I think it's more of this kind of, and no one cares, and no one really is there to grieve for me, and it's kind of this, this parallel structure, because obviously Dickens was obsessed with the youth of his country. And so kind of this parallel between him and Tiny Tim, them both dying, them both being, you have this child who's grieved for, and this old man who, in his lifetime should have made so many connections, not grieved for, and that's the redemption. That's the spot where it's finally like, wait a minute, it's not this that I die, it's the fact that I die and no one cares. And I love one of my favorite old versions of it was the one where Richard Little plays all the different parts of the Christmas story, Christmas Carol. And, he has the very Shakespearean gravedigger scene where everyone's making fun of him, that he died. So it's not just that he died, but it's like they're all kind of really ragging on him. That scene really sticks out in my mind. And that's what it is. It's like, what are you going to leave as your legacy?
Well, I think part of the misconception with A Christmas Carol, especially some of the more made-for-television versions, some of the more popularized versions of it, is too many people look at it as Scrooge's transformation doesn't come until faced with that death. That's what changes his mind, and they kind of dismiss the effect that the other ghosts have on him. And in terms of of his character, I mean, we see him kind of putting up a fight to the message that the other ghosts are trying to convey to him. But it's kind of like a chipping away. It's not just all of a sudden this one revelation when faced with his own death. It's a chipping away and a realization of who he was that basically eventually leads to that breakdown of, it's not the fact that he dies, it's the fact that he dies before he gets the chance to change who he was.
And I think a lot of what people miss, because not many adaptations focus on this, is the fact that, when he is in the present, when he's with the ghosts of Christmas present, the guy gets old. You know what I'm saying? Like, as they're going along, as Christmas is running out, he's aging as it goes. And so Scrooge is actually able to kind of see in this, and of course it's then like, exclamation point when he gets to the actual yet to come part, that time is running out. You know what I'm saying? Like, and Marley says the same exact thing to him at the beginning. It's like this, you're running out of time. This is for many people there will be other brothers that can come in and step in, but this is just about it for you.
The concept of Marley's ghost is always the one that's the most interesting to me, not just because that's the one that Goofy played in Mickey's Christmas Carol, but also because it's almost like Scrooge would be dismissive of the other three had it not been Marley that came and foretold of their arrival.
Yeah, and like I hinted at the beginning, who the heck sends it?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And that's the really at the for some reason I think I was because we were in such in-depth discussions in class on it. Who sends Marley? Marley makes no reference to him being sent from God or from Jesus or anything like that. It's like, is Marley kind of trying to chip away at his own redemption and his own purgatory, maybe trying to get rid of some of the chains by doing this? Does he find love? And in that wants to save someone who's in the same situation? All of these, and does Marley then control these other ghosts? Does he send these ghosts? Is there some kind of force that sends them? And Marley really exemplifies that because he is the counterpoint to the redemption of Scrooge. But if you look at it, there's got to be some kind of motivation for him. Because even if he shows love to Scrooge, in that classic line of "mankind should have been my business," it's is there this story that he's playing out, and that's why he goes. And you have to think and of course Dickens is great for his opening lines, but it's something like Marley was as dead as a doorknob. That kind of says it all, and puts you kind of right in place for what this story is going to be about. And unfortunately, it's never really explored too much in depth exactly, what is the force that's sending Marley out, and what is his relationship to these ghosts? Did he see them himself and make the wrong decision?
If I recall correctly, doesn't Scrooge mention Marley ahead of time, in a sense, summoning him? When he's talking about, Marley's desk being there and empty it just before Christmas, before he goes to bed, before he goes home?
Well, that's why it starts with him. You know what I'm saying? Like, it starts with talking about Marley and what Marley's been through, and then, of course, he first sights it before he goes in the house, which already gets his mind thinking about it. So that's
what
interesting.
I'm saying.
Does he actually
does Scrooge summon him by thinking about it? You're asking who's sending Marley. I think it was Scrooge himself summoning him. So
the desire for the change was kind of coming from within and subconsciously.
Scrooge's own self-conscious, yes.
Which, of course, then supports, some people's belief that the entire thing is a hallucination, and that he's kind of having this own kind of moral play inside of himself, either in dream form or in hallucination form, be it from bad food or for some other thing that and therefore Marley becomes the first kind of tangible evidence for him in this kind of moral play that he's kind of involved in.
And of course,
excellent point, Moniz. I'm writing that down. I'm totally stealing that.
By all means.
And the idea you mentioned briefly though, the chains of Marley, and the fact that he is kind of tied down to that Scrooge type existence. He can't break those chains, and I mean I don't know enough about the idea of chains, how they're associated with ghosts, but naturally we hear later stories of ghosts having to do with rattling chains. Was that a construct that came about because of Marley's Ghost, or was that something that was associated with ghosts before Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol?
Actually, I believe that was well before, because a lot of times the ghosts were reports from people that were suffragists, and usually those were people that were criminals that were chained to this or that, or slavery.
So the chains, I think that even though it could have been a characterization of a ghost, but it did have a deeper literal meaning in Marley's sense.
Right, and of course you have to keep in mind that so much of this from Dickens' time was based on that suffrage that Moniz was talking about, and that it was, the story and all Dickens' stories are about slavery, and are about trying to break away from that. So it would only make sense that he would then turn to what he knew, which was then that symbolism of those chains meaning that.
Is there, in the modern retellings of this and everything from, the 1950s teleplays versions to the Muppets versions to everything, do you see the original intent of the story being diluted down to now it's just this basic redemptive story and it doesn't have as many layers as it did with Dickens' version? Are we losing
completely.
something in the translation?
Completely. I mean, I think, my favorite version is Scrooged, with Bill Murray.
Yeah.
Which I would probably put in my top 10 favorite movies of all time, regardless of Christmas. I just think it's, and why do we not remember Richard Donner anymore? But anyway, as a side note, and in that version, for example, ignorance and want are under the cloak of the ghost of Christmas yet to come. When, traditionally they're in the ghost of Christmas present. And so it's kind of like, they took a complete poetic license with that, not even really caring or even touching upon, what those two children are meant to symbolize. And once again, Dickens' tight connection between, the adult world and this child slavery world. And so, you see that. And probably the other best example of that is that you ask people about, A Christmas Carol, and they usually can't give you the full title. They usually don't know what the title actually is. My students had no idea when I said A Christmas Carol what I was talking about, and then I was like, it's Scrooge. They go, oh, yeah. Most of them focus on the Scrooge aspect of it, and I think that has something to do with it. Of course, they've seen so many versions that they don't know titles anymore anyway. They're all just kind of meshed together. But when referring to the ghost, they refer to it as the ghost of the past, the ghost of the present, the ghost of the future. And it's like, but it's not. If you really read it, every single moment that happens in that story happens on Christmas Eve or Christmas. And so it's really this kind of distortion, like we really kind of forget the fact that they're not the ghosts of the past, they're the ghosts of Christmas's past. Mm-hmm. And that really, all the emotional stuff we were talking about before, if we look back, we could probably trace ourselves to where we were on Christmases or during the holiday season throughout our lives, and great changes that happened, or great moments that we could change that happened in those moments. So I think those are probably the two biggest distortions, especially, the taking out many times of ignorance and want, but then also kind of like the interchangeable, and there's a few other versions that do it, and then of course this, forgetting of what the ghosts actually, what their names were and what these scenes are supposed to be.
And we're coming up on the end of the show here, but I will say this about Scrooge. The one thing that it does convey very well is the world that the Scrooge, Frank, the Scrooge type character is involved in, because it's not just him that thinks, his way of thinking is supported by those around him. The owner of the network, likes the way that he does things. So there's justification for him to be the way that he is, and it's easier to kind of continue in that realm than to make the change. That's one thing that's lost in a lot of these versions is how much easier it would be for Scrooge to just continue how he is, and what a big sacrifice he's making to make that change to be a better person.
And once again, to harp on the ignorance and want kind of thing again, it's if you follow the track of Scrooge throughout the story, it's subtle, and it's of course there's these great moments where he could have changed and he didn't change, specifically talking about the past. But for the most part, and if we ever took Freud to Dickens, we would go crazy. But there are these moments in his childhood and kind of in his early years where it's a very subtle thing, where the spirit is there and then it just kind of gets slightly twisted because he's giving into that want part of it, mainly because of his ignorance. And so as he's kind of evolving into this picture the world is kind of telling him it's okay, and then of course he takes it and runs with it and goes beyond what Scrooge is not a creature of, who pops out of nowhere. He's in many cases, or many ways, a representation of what society is asking him to be, and unfortunately he doesn't have a stop mechanism.
Well, I'll ask you this, Chris, before we go, because we are running out of time here, but you remember the character in Scrooge? Do you remember his full name?
Francis Xavier Cross.
And here's a little interesting side note, and I don't know if it's related, but I've just heard over the years, what was the hottest toy of the era when that movie came out, of the late 1980s? What was one of the hottest toys that everybody had trouble getting at Christmas time?
Cabbage Patch Kids.
And what does it say on the ass of every Cabbage Patch Kid?
Xavier Roberts.
I don't know. Are they kind of hinting at something there? I don't know. All right. Well, that does it for this week's show, but we've got plenty coming up for you. We're going to be off next week for the Christmas holiday. We're going to be back on New Year's Day night to look at some predictions for 2011. And then, Chris, I know you got a whole bunch of stuff lined up coming up in the coming early months of 2011.
January is going to be crazy. We've got Stan Freeman coming back on. We've got people talking about zombies.
WBSM.
We've got the computer going off on its own.
We've got a computer going on. We've got people talking about Nazis and the occult and Roswell, and so it's just going to be. We've got someone coming on about Coral Castle. It's going to be a really exciting month, and hopefully feeding right into February, especially with no basketball, dude. We're going to have an amazing late winter and spring.
Awesome. All right. Well, we look forward to talking to you. Happy holidays to you and yours, and to everyone out there in the audience. Until we come back in 2011, for Matt Moniz, for Matt Costa, for Chris Balzano, I'm Tim Weisberg, and we want you all to stay spooktacular.